The airport lounge smelled like expensive leather and subtle cologne, all muted grays and chrome fixtures designed to make wealthy travelers feel important. I sat in a corner armchair with a direct view of Gate 47, sipping Earl Grey tea that had gone cold 20 minutes ago, watching my husband laugh with a woman who wasn't me. They sat close together, too close for colleagues, not close enough to be obvious to casual observers. But I wasn't a casual observer. I'd been watching for 6 weeks now, documenting every lie, every late meeting, every business trip that seemed to require more preparation than usual. Blake's hand rested on her lower back as they stood in line to board the flight to Singapore. The same flight he told me he was taking alone for a critical merger negotiation. The same trip he'd used to explain why he'd need to be unreachable for 48 hours, time difference and back-to-back meetings, he'd said, kissing my forehead like I was a child who wouldn't understand the complexities of international business. Her name was Sienna. I'd learned that 3 weeks ago when I'd hired a private investigator whose invoice currently sat in a file folder under Business Expenses, Future Ventures. The teacup didn't shake in my hand. Though everything inside me wanted to scream, I'd practiced this, the calm, the stillness, the mask that revealed nothing, while my world rearranged itself into something harder and more deliberate underneath. Blake checked his phone, and I knew he was reading the text I'd sent 10 minutes ago. Safe travels, darling. I'll miss you. Don't work too hard. Love you. He'd responded with a heart emoji, a single lazy heart emoji, sent while standing with his mistress at an airport gate, about to board a plane for what he'd described as a grueling solo trip. I set down my teacup and pulled out my phone, opening the folder of screenshots I'd been collecting methodically. Hotel reservations for 2, dinner receipts from romantic restaurants, credit card charges for jewelry I'd never received, text messages I'd recovered from his laptop, the one he thought was password protected but wasn't, not really. Not when you'd been married for 8 years and knew your spouse's patterns better than they knew themselves. The messages were exactly what you'd expect. Passionate declarations, planning for a future together, complaints about the situation at home, meaning me. A wife who'd supposedly stopped understanding him, who was too focused on her own career, who didn't appreciate his needs. I'd read them all without crying. That surprised me, how dry my eyes had stayed while I watched my marriage dissolve in pixels and lies. They were boarding now, first-class passengers moving down the jet bridge in their expensive suits and designer luggage. Blake adjusted his carry-on, said something that made Sienna laugh, a laugh I'd once thought was exclusive to me, and together they disappeared into the tunnel leading to the plane. I waited until the gate door closed before standing. My navy dress was immaculate, my hair perfectly styled, my makeup flawless. I looked like a woman who had everything together, who was successful and confident and completely in control. Which was exactly true, just not in the way anyone would have expected. I walked through the airport with measured steps, passing travelers rushing to catch flights, families saying goodbyes, business people checking their phones with practiced urgency. Nobody looked at me twice. I was invisible in my composure, just another well-dressed woman navigating an airport on a Tuesday afternoon. But inside, I was counting down, counting the hours until Blake landed in Singapore and discovered what I'd done, counting the days until my carefully orchestrated revenge reached its perfect, inevitable conclusion. If you're going to betray someone, make sure they're not smarter than you, I thought, allowing myself a small, private smile as I stepped into the sunlight of the parking garage. Blake had underestimated me. He'd assumed that 12 years together, 4 dating, 8 married, meant he knew everything about me. He'd assumed I was the woman he'd married, softer, more trusting, less willing to fight back. He was about to learn how catastrophically wrong those assumptions were. I drove home through familiar streets, past the expensive neighborhood where we'd bought our house 3 years ago. Blake had wanted the biggest one on the block, the one that announced success and stability. I'd wanted something smaller, cozier, but I'd deferred to his judgment, like I'd deferred on so many things. No more deferring. The house was empty when I arrived, echoing with the silence of too much space designed for a family we'd never started. Blake had always said we should wait. Wait until his career was more established. Wait until we had more savings. Wait until the timing was perfect. Now I understood. He'd been waiting to see if something better came along. Someone better. Someone who didn't know him well enough to see through his carefully constructed persona. I went to my office, the small room on the second floor that Blake called my hobby space, as if running a successful marketing consultancy was recreational. My laptop was already open, files organized in folders with innocuous names that meant nothing to anyone but me. I pulled up the timeline I'd been maintaining for 6 weeks, since the night I'd noticed Blake deleting text messages with unusual urgency. The timeline documented everything: dates, locations, lies, expenses. It read like a case file, which was intentional. I'd been building evidence, not just collecting hurt feelings. My phone buzzed. A text from Blake's mother, Constance. Hope Blake has a safe flight. You must be lonely without him. Come for dinner Thursday? I texted back. He just boarded. Thank you for the invitation. Thursday sounds lovely. Constance didn't know. Nobody knew, except the private investigator I'd hired and my lawyer, Natasha, who I'd been meeting with secretly for 3 weeks. Even my best friend Taylor thought I was stressed about work, not preparing to dismantle my marriage with surgical precision. I opened another folder on my laptop, the one labeled Financial Independence, and reviewed the account I'd been building for 2 months. Every bonus from my consultancy, every freelance project payment, every dollar that was mine alone had been redirected to a new account Blake didn't know existed. It wasn't much yet, but it was growing. By the time everything unfolded, I'd have enough to maintain my independence without touching our shared assets. Because I wasn't just leaving Blake. I was making sure he understood exactly what he'd lost, what he'd thrown away for someone who looked good in an airport lounge, but who'd never really known him the way I had. The revenge wouldn't be dramatic or violent. It would be quiet, methodical, and absolutely devastating. It would use Blake's own lies and decisions against him, turning his betrayal into his downfall with such elegant simplicity that he'd have no one to blame but himself. And it would start with a single plane ticket. I pulled up my email and found the confirmation from the airline, a ticket I'd purchased 3 days ago, scheduled for the same Singapore flight Blake thought he was taking with Sienna. Just one ticket, just for me, departing tomorrow morning, arriving 12 hours before Blake's return flight. He thought I was home, clueless and trusting, waiting for his calls and texts about how difficult his meetings were, how much he missed me, how he couldn't wait to get home. Instead, I'd be in Singapore, at the same hotel where he'd made reservations under a fake name, ready to be there when he arrived with Sienna, ready to watch his face when he realized his careful deceptions had been completely transparent to someone who'd actually been paying attention. That was just the opening move. The real revenge would unfold over weeks, each piece falling into place with the precision of dominoes I'd spent 6 weeks arranging. I thought about the woman I'd been 8 years ago, standing at an altar promising forever to a man I'd believed was honest and faithful. That woman had been naive, had assumed love was enough, had trusted without verifying. This version of me, the one who'd discovered betrayal and decided to fight back, was different, harder, smarter, less interested in forgiveness than in justice. I spent the rest of the afternoon packing for Singapore, choosing outfits that were professional and polished. Nothing dramatic, nothing that screamed confrontation. I was traveling for business, if anyone asked. A last-minute opportunity, a client meeting that couldn't wait. All lies, but justified lies. The kind told in self-defense rather than malice. At 6 p.m., Blake called via video chat from the Singapore airport. He looked tired but happy, the kind of happiness that came from successfully deceiving someone you supposedly loved. Hey babe, just landed. Flight was long but fine. About to head to the hotel and crash. Tomorrow's going to be brutal. Meetings start at 7 a.m. That's early, I said, keeping my voice warm and sympathetic. Make sure you get some rest. I miss you already. Miss you too. Listen, I might be hard to reach tomorrow. You know how these merger talks get. Don't worry if you don't hear from me for a day or two. Of course, I understand. Just focus on work. You're the best, you know that? His smile was so genuine, so practiced. I don't deserve you. You really don't, I agreed, meaning it in ways he'd never understand. We hung up, and I stared at my reflection in the darkening window. I looked calm, composed, unchanged, but inside, everything had shifted. Tomorrow, I'd board my flight to Singapore. Tomorrow, I'd begin the process of showing Blake exactly what happened when you underestimated the person who knew you best. Tomorrow, the careful lies he'd been constructing would start collapsing around him, and I'd be there to watch, composed and calm and absolutely certain that what I was doing was necessary. Because some betrayals couldn't be forgiven. They could only be answered with equal precision, equal planning, equal commitment to seeing justice done. I wasn't the victim in this story. Sweet dreams. But there would be no sweet dreams. Not for him. Not once he realized what was coming. I turned off the lights and went to bed early, needing rest for the confrontation ahead. As I lay in the darkness, I thought about the quote I'd read weeks ago. Something about revenge being a dish best served cold. That wasn't quite right. Revenge was best served with such calculated precision that the person being destroyed never saw it coming until it was too late to do anything but watch their world crumble. Blake thought he was clever. He thought planning a romantic getaway disguised as a business trip was smart, careful, undetectable. He was wrong. And tomorrow, his education in exactly how wrong would begin. I closed my eyes and slept deeply, dreamlessly. Tomorrow, Blake would start learning what it cost to betray someone who loved strategy more than drama, who valued justice over forgiveness, who'd spent 6 weeks preparing for this exact moment. Tomorrow, the lying husband would become the exposed fool, and I'd be there to ensure he never forgot it. The flight to Singapore was 13 hours of controlled anticipation. I sat in business class. I'd used miles Blake didn't know I'd been accumulating separately, and worked on my laptop, reviewing the evidence one more time. Photos, text messages, credit card statements, hotel confirmations. Everything organized chronologically. Everything documented with timestamps and locations. I'd learned a lot about evidence collection in the past 6 weeks. Turned out, when you approach betrayal like a research project instead of an emotional crisis, you discovered all sorts of useful information. Like how Blake's company credit card, the one he claimed was only for business expenses, had been used for jewelry purchases at Tiffany's 3 months ago. Jewelry I'd never received. Or how his late meetings always seemed to end at hotels with bars rather than at the office. Or how Sienna worked in the Singapore office of a competitor company, which meant this trip was likely more about maintaining their affair than closing any merger. The flight attendant offered me champagne, which I declined. I needed clarity, not celebration. Not yet. I thought about Blake's face when I'd seen him at the airport, how relaxed he'd looked, how confident. He'd believed his performance completely. 8 years of marriage, and he'd never once considered that I might be the kind of person who'd notice discrepancies, who'd investigate, who'd plan. That was his first mistake, assuming that being nice meant being naive. I'd been nice for 8 years, patient when he worked late, understanding when he was stressed, supportive when he complained about office politics. I'd deferred on decisions about houses and cars and vacations, assuming that compromise was what marriage required. But there's a difference between compromise and erasure, between partnership and subordination. Blake had slowly trained me to accept less attention, less honesty, less respect, while taking everything I offered as his due. That ended today. I slept a few hours on the flight, waking as we began our descent into Singapore. The city sparkled below, all modern glass towers and organized efficiency. I'd never been here before, despite Blake making this trip quarterly for the past year. He'd always said it was too boring for me to tag along, too much work and not enough sightseeing. Now I understood why he discouraged me from joining. I cleared customs smoothly, my luggage appearing promptly on the carousel, like the universe was cooperating with my plans. A taxi took me to the Marina Bay area, where Blake had reserved a room at the Fullerton Hotel, a luxury property he'd justified as necessary for impressing clients. I didn't go to the Fullerton. Instead, I checked into the Raffles across the street, a hotel with a perfect view of the Fullerton's entrance. The room I'd reserved, also using separate miles Blake didn't know about, had a small balcony overlooking the street. Perfect surveillance position. It was early evening Singapore time, which meant Blake's flight would land in about 4 hours. I unpacked carefully, setting up my laptop and phone on the desk, testing the camera angle from my balcony to ensure I could photograph the hotel entrance clearly. Then I showered, changed into comfortable clothes, and ordered room service, Singapore noodles and jasmine tea. I ate slowly, watching the street below, counting down. My phone buzzed, Blake texting from the plane. About to land. Still exhausted, looking forward to sleeping in a real bed. Love you. I didn't respond immediately. Let him wait. Let him wonder if I was busy or just didn't see the message right away. 10 minutes later, I texted back, "Sweet dreams. I'm just heading to bed too. Talk tomorrow?" "Definitely. Sleep well. Beautiful." The endearment felt hollow now, just a word he deployed automatically, without thought or genuine feeling. I positioned myself on the balcony with my phone and a zoom lens I'd purchased specifically for this purpose. The light was perfect. Golden hour in Singapore, everything illuminated, but not harsh. At 7:15 p.m., a taxi pulled up to the Fullerton's entrance. Blake emerged first, looking around with the casual confidence of someone who believed he was safe. Thousands of miles from accountability. Then Sienna stepped out behind him, and they stood close while the doorman collected their luggage. I took 12 photos in rapid succession. Blake's hand on Sienna's waist. Sienna laughing at something he said. Both of them walking into the hotel together, casual and comfortable, like they'd done this many times before. They had, I knew from the investigators' reports. At least 5 other trips over the past 8 months, always to different cities, always under the guise of Blake's work travel. I lowered my camera and felt something cold settle in my chest. This was real now. Not just evidence on a screen, but actual human beings making choices that destroyed what I'd thought we were building together. But I didn't cry. I'd done my crying 3 weeks ago. Alone in my car after reading text messages where Blake called me the situation at home that he was managing carefully. Now I just felt determined. I spent the next hour reviewing my plan, checking each step, ensuring nothing had been overlooked. At 9 p.m., I texted Blake. "Hope you're settling in okay. I know you're probably exhausted. Sleep well." He responded 20 minutes later. "Just got to the room. Already half asleep. Tomorrow's going to be intense. Talk soon. Love you. Love you." Such easy lies. I wondered if Sienna knew he was texting his wife. If she cared. If she'd convinced herself that what they had was real love. That Blake was leaving me for her. That she was special rather than just convenient. The investigators' report suggested Sienna was divorced, mid-30s, ambitious. She'd been with her company for 6 years, rising steadily. The affair with Blake had started at a conference in Bangkok 9 months ago. 9 months. He'd been living a double life for 9 months, and I'd only discovered it 6 weeks ago. How much longer would it have continued if I hadn't noticed him deleting texts? How much longer would he have kept me in the dark, playing the faithful husband while building a separate life thousands of miles away. I went to bed early, setting an alarm for 6 a.m. Tomorrow would require energy and focus. Tomorrow, the real work began. I slept surprisingly well, waking refreshed and clear-headed. I dressed in business casual, tailored pants, silk blouse, minimal jewelry. I looked like someone in Singapore for work, which was technically true if you considered revenge a form of professional development. At 7:30 a.m., I positioned myself in the Fullerton's lobby, hidden behind a newspaper in a corner chair with a clear view of the elevators. The hotel was busy with business travelers, everyone focused on their phones and schedules. I was invisible in plain sight. At 8:15, Blake and Sienna emerged from the elevators, both dressed for business, looking well-rested and happy. They were trying to maintain professional distance, I noticed. No touching, no obvious intimacy. But the familiarity was clear in how they moved together, how they anticipated each other's movements. They went to breakfast in the hotel restaurant. I gave them 10 minutes, then followed, taking a table partially hidden by a large plant arrangement. I ordered coffee and pastries I didn't eat, watching them through gaps in the foliage. They held hands under the table, laughed at inside jokes, made plans for their day in voices I could barely hear but could read in their body language. I took more photos, careful and subtle. Then I paid my bill and left before they could possibly notice me. Back in my room, I uploaded the photos to a secure cloud folder, adding them to my growing collection. The evidence was overwhelming now. Not just texts and receipts, but visual proof of them together. Clearly intimate, clearly lying. I spent the rest of the morning working on actual client projects. Life didn't stop just because your marriage was imploding. Bills still needed paying. Responsibilities still needed fulfilling. At noon, Blake texted, "Meeting's going well but exhausting. How's your day?" I responded, "Busy with work. Missing you. Miss you too. Wish you were here." The hypocrisy was almost impressive. That afternoon, I did something I'd been planning for weeks. I called Blake's boss, Howard, who I'd met several times at company events. "Cassandra, what a surprise. Is everything all right?" "Hi, Howard. I'm actually calling about something sensitive. Do you have a few minutes?" "Of course. What's going on?" "I'm in Singapore, and I've discovered something concerning about Blake's business trips. I think we should meet in person. Are you available today?" There was a long pause. "You're in Singapore?" "Yes. I'd rather explain everything face to face." "Could we meet for coffee in an hour?" Howard's company had offices in Singapore. I'd researched this carefully, knew he was currently in town for quarterly reviews. Yes. All right. There's a Starbucks on Shenton Way. Do you know it?" "I'll find it." "Thank you, Howard." I dressed more formally and took a taxi to the coffee shop. Howard was already there, looking concerned and confused. He was in his 50s, sharp-eyed, the kind of executive who'd built his career on reading people accurately. "Cassandra, you're worrying me. What's this about?" I pulled out my tablet and showed him photos of Blake and Sienna at the airport, at the hotel, at breakfast. Then I showed him the expense reports I'd copied from Blake's laptop, highlighting personal charges disguised as business expenses. Blake's been having an affair with Sienna Hartley from Apex Solutions. He's been using company trips funded by your company, to maintain this relationship. I have 6 weeks of documentation showing personal expenses charged as business costs, hotels reserved under false pretenses, and time that was supposed to be spent on company business devoted to personal matters. Howard's face had gone very still. "How long have you known?" 6 weeks. I hired a private investigator after I noticed irregularities in Blake's schedule and expenses. "Why come to me?" "Because Blake's been lying to both of us. He told you this trip was for merger negotiations, but Sienna's company is one of your competitors. I think you should investigate whether Blake's been sharing proprietary information in exchange for..." Personal considerations. I showed him text messages between Blake and Sienna that mentioned opportunities and information sharing and mutual benefit. Howard's expression had gone from concerned to coldly professional. This is serious. If Blake's been sharing company information, I'm not making accusations. I'm showing you evidence and letting you draw your own conclusions. But, Howard, I think you need to know that the employee you're funding to travel internationally for business has been using those trips for personal affairs while potentially compromising your company's interests. Does Blake know you're here? No. He thinks I'm home completely unaware. What are you going to do? My marriage is my business. Your company's security is yours. I'm just making sure you have information to make informed decisions. Howard took my tablet and photographed several of the documents I'd shown him. I'll need to investigate this thoroughly. If what you're suggesting is true, Blake's at the Fullerton, room 847. He's planning to be here through Friday. If you want to verify anything, you know where to find him. I stood to leave. Howard looked up at me with something like respect. Cassandra, I'm sorry you're going through this, but thank you for bringing this to my attention. Corporate espionage is something we take very seriously. I figured you would. Take care, Howard. I left the coffee shop feeling lighter. Phase 1 of my plan was complete. Blake had used his company's resources to facilitate an affair. Now his company knew. Whatever happened next would be between Blake and Howard, but I'd planted seeds that would have consequences regardless of how I chose to handle the personal betrayal. I spent the rest of the afternoon playing tourist, visiting Gardens by the Bay and the Art Science Museum. If anyone asked why I was in Singapore, I wanted to have authentic stories about sightseeing, about taking a spontaneous trip for myself. That evening, Blake called. Hey babe, finally finished for the day. These negotiations are brutal, I'm sure. How's it going? Slowly. Lots of back and forth. I might need to extend my trip a few days if we can't reach agreement by Friday. Whatever you need to do, I'll be here when you get back. You're amazing. I don't tell you that enough. No, you don't. I'll make it up to you when I get home. Take you somewhere nice, just the two of us. That sounds wonderful. We talked for a few more minutes, Blake spinning elaborate lies about his day, me responding with careful neutrality. When we hung up, I felt nothing but cold certainty that I was doing the right thing. Tomorrow was Thursday. Blake was scheduled to return Friday evening. I was scheduled to leave Friday morning, arriving home several hours before him, which meant I had one more day in Singapore, one more day to ensure everything was in place for the final confrontation. I spent Thursday morning shopping, buying clothes I'd never worn for Blake, treating myself to things I'd wanted but always deferred on. It felt good, spending money that was mine on things that pleased me, without considering anyone else's opinion. At lunch, I received an email from Howard. Thank you for bringing this matter to my attention. After preliminary investigation, I can confirm your concerns were justified. Blake will be dealt with appropriately. I'm sorry for what you're going through. I didn't respond. What was there to say? Thursday afternoon, I watched Blake and Sienna leave the hotel together, laughing and holding hands once they were away from the entrance. I took more photos, adding them to my collection. Then I went to a lawyer's office I'd researched carefully, an international family law specialist who could advise on divorce proceedings involving complex financial situations. I want to file for divorce, I told her after explaining my situation. But I want to do it strategically. My husband has been using marital assets to fund an affair. I want to ensure I'm protected financially and that his deception is documented properly. The lawyer, a sharp woman named Rebecca Tan, reviewed my evidence with impressive efficiency. You've been thorough. This is excellent documentation. In terms of filing, you have several options. You could file in Singapore while you're both here, which would give you certain advantages. Or you could file back home, where you have more established residency. What would you recommend? File at home, but use this trip as evidence of his deception. The fact that he lied about the nature of his trip, used shared resources for personal affairs, and placed himself in potential conflict of interest with his employer. All of that strengthens your position significantly. We spent 2 hours going through strategy. By the time I left, I had a clear plan for filing divorce papers the moment I returned home. Thursday evening, Blake called again. Last night here. Negotiations are finally wrapping up. I'll be home tomorrow night as scheduled. I can't wait to see you. Me too. I've missed you so much. Such easy lies, such practiced deception. Blake, can I ask you something? Of course. Do you ever regret marrying me? There was a pause. What? No. Why would you ask that? I don't know. Sometimes I feel like we've drifted apart, like you're not really present anymore. Babe, I'm just stressed with work. Once this deal closes, things will get easier. I promise. Okay, I hope you're right. I am. Trust me. Trust me. The words felt like knives. We hung up, and I stood on my balcony looking out at Singapore's glittering skyline, thinking about trust and betrayal, and the distance between what people said and what they actually did. Blake wanted me to trust him while doing everything possible to prove he was untrustworthy. Tomorrow, that contradiction would finally catch up with him. Tomorrow, I'd fly home and begin the next phase of my plan. Tomorrow, Blake would arrive home expecting his loving, trusting wife. Instead, he'd find someone who'd stopped believing his lies weeks ago and had been carefully, methodically preparing to ensure he faced consequences for every deception. I packed my suitcase and set it by the door. Singapore had been productive. I'd gathered evidence, alerted Blake's employer, consulted with a lawyer, and confirmed that yes, I could absolutely do what needed to be done without breaking down or second-guessing myself. The woman who'd stood at an altar 8 years ago might not have been capable of this level of calculated response. But that woman didn't exist anymore. She'd been replaced by someone harder, smarter, less willing to accept betrayal as something to endure rather than something to answer. I went to bed early, sleeping soundly despite everything. Tomorrow required energy and focus. Tomorrow, the revenge I'd been planning for 6 weeks would finally begin to unfold in earnest. And Blake would learn what happened when you underestimated the person who knew you best, who'd been watching quietly while you thought you were getting away with everything. Sleep came easily. I was ready. I landed back home Friday morning, taking a taxi directly from the airport to the house Blake thought I'd never left. The familiar streets felt different now. Not home exactly, but a stage set where I'd been playing a role for 8 years without fully realizing it. The house was exactly as I'd left it, empty and echoing. I unpacked my Singapore suitcase and immediately started packing another one, this time with clothes and personal items I'd need for the next several weeks. Documents, photos, my laptop, jewelry my grandmother had given me. Everything that was truly mine, separated from the shared possessions that would need to be divided later. I was efficient, methodical. No lingering over memories. No tearful goodbyes to rooms where happy moments had occurred. Those moments felt distant now, possibly imaginary. Had we ever really been happy, or had I just been performing happiness while Blake performed fidelity? By noon, I'd moved 3 suitcases to my car. I'd rent a storage unit on Monday for furniture I wanted to keep. For now, mobility was more important than possessions. At 2 p.m., I met with Natasha, my lawyer, in her downtown office. She'd reviewed the evidence I'd sent from Singapore and had documents ready for my signature. "You're sure about this?" she asked, sliding the divorce petition across her desk. "Once we file, there's no going back. I'm absolutely sure." "All right then, sign here, here, and here." I signed without hesitation. My signature was steady, my hand sure. This was the right decision, the only decision. We'll file this Monday morning, Natasha explained. Blake will be served at his office on Monday afternoon. Based on the evidence you've provided, particularly the misuse of company resources and the potential corporate espionage, I expect he'll be too distracted by work problems to mount any immediate challenge to the divorce terms. What about the house? You have equal claim to it. If you want to stay, you can. If you want to sell and split proceeds, we can force that. What do you want? I thought about the house Blake had insisted on buying, the one that announced success and stability to our neighbors. I'd never loved it. It was too big, too cold, too much about appearance and not enough about comfort. I want it sold. Split the proceeds equally. I don't want anything he can claim was his choice or his investment. I want clean separation. That's very mature of you. It's not maturity. It's strategy. I don't want him to have any claim on me once this is done. Natasha smiled slightly. Fair enough. What about his 401k and other retirement accounts? I want what I'm entitled to legally. No more, no less. The evidence of affair could entitle you to more depending on how the judge views marital asset misuse. I don't want more. I want exactly what's fair. I don't want this to be about punishment or revenge. I want it to be about justice and clean separation. All right? I'll draft terms accordingly. We spent another hour going through details. By the time I left Natasha's office, I had a clear understanding of what the next several months would look like. Difficult? Definitely. But necessary. I drove to Taylor's apartment, the friend I'd known since college, who'd been texting me all week, asking if I was okay. I've been in Singapore, I told her when she opened the door. What? Why? Following Blake, gathering evidence, confirming what I suspected. Taylor's face went through several expressions before settling on fury. He's been cheating? For 9 months. With a woman named Sienna, who works for a competitor. He's been using business trips to see her. That absolute bastard. Cass, I'm so sorry. Don't be sorry. Be helpful. Can I stay here for a few days? Just until I find a furnished apartment? You've been planning this for 6 weeks and never said anything? I needed to be sure. And I needed to not be talked out of it. If I'd told you sooner, you would have tried to convince me to confront Blake first, to try counseling, to give him a chance to explain. Would that have been so bad? Yes. Because Blake's explanations would have been more lies, more excuses, more manipulation designed to make me doubt what I knew was true. This way, I controlled the narrative. I gathered evidence first, then made decisions based on facts rather than hopes. When does he find out? He lands at 7 tonight. I'm supposed to be home, waiting for him like the good wife who believed every lie he told. But you won't be. No. I'll be here. He'll come home to an empty house and a note. What does the note say? I pulled it out of my pocket and showed her. Blake, I know about Sienna. I know about the lies, the trips, the double life you've been living. I was in Singapore. I saw you together. I have evidence of everything. I filed for divorce. You'll be served with papers on Monday. I've moved out. Don't try to contact me. All communication should go through my lawyer. You told me to trust you. I trusted you for 8 years. You repaid that trust with betrayal and lies. Now you'll face the consequences. The plane ticket home was for one. I hope the flight felt lonely. Cassandra Taylor read it twice. That last line, that's brutal. It's accurate. He lied about going alone. Made elaborate plans to sneak someone onto a trip he claimed was solo work. The irony needed to be highlighted. What do you think he'll do? Panic. Call me repeatedly. Try to explain or excuse or minimize. Eventually, he'll get angry and defensive. Then he'll try to blame me somehow. Say I drove him to it. That I wasn't attentive enough. That our marriage was already over, so his affair doesn't really count. You've thought about this a lot. I've had 6 weeks to think about nothing else. Taylor made tea and we sat in her living room, while I showed her the evidence I'd collected. Photos, texts, emails, expense reports. She was horrified and impressed in equal measure. How are you so calm about this? I'm not calm. I'm controlled. There's a difference. Most people would be falling apart. I fell apart 3 weeks ago when I first read those texts calling me the situation. I cried in my car for 2 hours. But I couldn't stay in that space. I had to decide whether to accept betrayal or fight back. I chose fighting back by being terrifyingly strategic about it. Yes, I'm proud of you, and also a little scared of you. I laughed. The first genuine laugh I'd had in weeks. Don't be scared. I'm only dangerous to people who lie to me. We ordered takeout and watched mindless television while I periodically checked my phone. Blake's flight had landed. He'd texted, "Just landed. Can't wait to see you. Be home in an hour." I didn't respond. An hour later, on my way home. Should I pick up dinner? Still no response. 30 minutes after that, he called. I didn't answer. Then, "Babe, where are you?" "I'm home, but you're not here." "Your car's gone. Are you okay?" I forwarded the text to Taylor. "He's home. He's found the note." "Are you going to respond?" "Not tonight. Let him sit with it. Let him panic. He spent 9 months lying to me. He can spend one night wondering where I am and what happens next." My phone rang 6 more times. Blake, Blake, Blake. I ignored every call. Then a text that made me actually laugh. "Please call me. I can explain. This isn't what you think." I showed Taylor. This isn't what I think. As if there's any explanation for 9 months of systematic lying that would make it acceptable. Are you going to respond to that? Eventually, but not tonight. Tonight, he gets to experience what it feels like to be shut out, to have someone you love refuse to engage with you. More calls, more texts, each one increasingly desperate. "Cassandra, please, just talk to me. I know you're hurt, but we can work through this. Don't throw away 8 years without at least hearing my side. This is cruel. At least tell me you're safe." "Your lawyer? Really? You're not even giving me a chance to explain?" "I love you. I made a mistake, but I love you." I showed each text to Taylor, who read them with increasing disgust. The audacity. He's making himself the victim. That's what people do when they're caught. They shift from offense to defense. Try to make you feel guilty for discovering their betrayal. Are you going to respond at all? Tomorrow, I'll text one thing. All communication through my lawyer. That's it. Not even an acknowledgement of his apologies. Those aren't apologies. Those are attempts at damage control. Real apologies take responsibility without excuses. These texts are all about him, his feelings, his wants, his timeline. Nothing about what he did to me. At midnight, the text stopped. Either Blake had given up or passed out from stress and wine. I didn't particularly care which. I slept in Taylor's guest room, exhausted but satisfied. The confrontation had begun. Blake now knew he was caught, exposed, facing consequences. Everything I'd been planning for 6 weeks was now in motion, unstoppable. Saturday morning, I woke to 17 missed calls from Blake and a dozen texts. I didn't sleep at all. "Please just talk to me. I'll do anything to fix this." Was Howard in Singapore? Did you talk to him? I got a call from him this morning, asking me to come to the office Monday for a serious discussion. That last text made me smile. Howard had wasted no time in investigating Blake's expense reports and his relationship with Sienna. I texted Blake one line. "All communication through my lawyer, Natasha Freeman. She'll contact you Monday with her information." Blake responded immediately. "Please don't do this. Let's talk face to face. I'll tell you everything. Just give me a chance." I put my phone on silent and didn't respond again. Taylor made breakfast and we talked through logistics. I'd stay with her through the weekend, then start apartment hunting Monday. I needed my own space, somewhere that was mine alone, where I could rebuild without any trace of Blake. "What do you need from me?" Taylor asked. "Honestly, just this. space to breathe, someone who knows the truth and doesn't judge me for how I'm handling it. I'm not judging. I'm in awe. Most people would have confronted Blake immediately, had a dramatic fight, maybe tried couples therapy. You turned it into a strategic operation, because confronting immediately would have given him time to prepare his defense, to craft better lies, to manipulate me into doubting what I knew. This way, he's off balance, reactive, scrambling. You've really thought through every angle. I had 6 weeks and nothing but motivation. Saturday afternoon, I went to look at furnished apartments. The third one I saw was perfect, a 1-bedroom in a modern building downtown, close to my office, with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the city. Clean, minimalist, nothing like the house I was leaving behind. I'll take it, I told the leasing agent. I can move in Monday? Monday works. Let me get the paperwork started. I signed a year lease without hesitation. This was my space now. My fresh start. Blake called 8 more times Saturday, each call ignored. His texts became increasingly desperate. I'm flying to Singapore Monday. To get fired, aren't I? What did you tell Howard? You've destroyed my career, along with our marriage. I hope you're happy with yourself. That last one almost made me respond. The sheer audacity of making himself the victim, of suggesting I destroyed anything, when he was the one who'd lied and cheated and betrayed. But I didn't respond. Let him stew in his own accusations. Sunday morning, Blake tried a different approach. He called Taylor. He's asking where you are, Taylor told me. What should I say? Tell him you don't know. Tell him I asked you not to share information with him. Taylor called him back. I listened to her half of the conversation. I don't know where she is, Blake. And if I did, I wouldn't tell you. Because you lied to her for 9 months. You don't get to make demands right now. No, I'm not keeping you from your wife. Cassandra's making her own choices. You should have thought about that before you started an affair. Don't call me again. She hung up looking satisfied. He's a mess. Good. Thank you for protecting my space. That's what friends do. Sunday afternoon, I went to the house while Blake was out. I'd tracked his location on the Find My Phone app we'd used to share locations, one of many technological conveniences that had become surveillance tools. I collected more of my things, books, art I'd bought before we married, my grandmother's china. Things that were mine, that I wanted in my new apartment. I was efficient, taking only what I needed, leaving everything that was truly shared. As I was loading the last box into my car, Blake pulled into the driveway. We stared at each other for a long moment. He looked terrible. Unshaven, exhausted, desperate. Good. Cassandra, please, just talk to me for 5 minutes. No, 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. I gave you 8 years, Blake. You don't get 5 more minutes of my time. I made a mistake, a stupid, terrible mistake, but I love you. That never stopped being true. You love me? You spent 9 months lying to me. You called me the situation at home, in text to another woman. You used our money to fund an affair. That's not love. That's contempt. I never meant to hurt you. No, you just never thought about me at all. That's worse. Please, don't throw away 8 years without trying to fix this. Blake, I can't fix what you broke. You need to understand, this isn't a fight we're having that can be resolved with an apology. This is me choosing to stop being married to someone who lies to me constantly. So that's it? You're just done? No therapy? No second chance? Nothing? I gave you every chance. Every time you lied about where you were or what you were doing, you chose Sienna over me. Every time you charged dinner with her to our joint account, you chose her. Every time you texted her while I was in the next room, you chose her. I'm done being the option you chose when your first choice wasn't available. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? Explain it to me. Make me understand how 9 months of systematic deception was somehow okay. He had no answer, just stood there, looking defeated. That's what I thought, I said. There is no explanation that makes this acceptable. So we're done, Blake. You'll be served with papers tomorrow. You'll lose your job because you violated company policy and potentially committed corporate espionage. You'll lose our house because I'm forcing a sale. You'll lose the respect of everyone who knows us because the truth is going to come out. And you'll have no one to blame but yourself. You're being cruel. I'm being honest. There's a difference. I got in my car and drove away, leaving him standing in the driveway of a house that would soon be neither of ours. That evening, back at Taylor's, I felt something close to peace. The confrontation was done. Blake knew I wasn't backing down, wasn't interested in his excuses, wasn't going to accept his version of events where he was somehow the wronged party. Tomorrow, he'd be served with divorce papers at work, probably shortly before or after being fired. His carefully constructed double life would collapse in a single day, and I'd be moving into my new apartment, starting my fresh beginning, living the life I should have started building 6 weeks ago. I thought about the plane ticket, the one I'd bought for myself, flying to Singapore to gather evidence while Blake thought I was safely at home. The title of this whole experience, if it were a story, my husband lied about his business trip. I bought his plane ticket home, for one. Except I hadn't actually bought his return ticket. That had been his all along. What I'd bought was my own freedom, my own flight towards something better, my own ticket away from a marriage that had stopped being real long before I'd admitted it was broken. Blake would have to find his own way home from the wreckage of his lies. I was already there, building something new. Monday morning arrived with crystalline clarity. I woke early in Taylor's guest room, dressed in my most professional outfit, a sharp charcoal suit that made me look powerful and certain, and drove to my new apartment building to complete the lease paperwork. The leasing office was efficient and welcoming. Within an hour, I had keys to apartment 817, with its floor-to-ceiling windows and view of the city skyline. I stood in the empty space, sunlight streaming through the glass, and felt something like hope. This was mine, not ours, not Blake's choice that I'd compromised on. Mine. I spent the morning buying furniture online, a bed, a couch, a dining table, all modern, all clean-lined, all completely different from the traditional heavy pieces Blake had preferred. Delivery was scheduled for Wednesday. Until then, I'd sleep on an air mattress and be perfectly content. At noon, I met with Natasha. Blake was served at his office an hour ago, she reported. And according to my sources, Howard called him into a meeting immediately afterward. I suspect he's being terminated as we speak. Good. You're remarkably calm about destroying your husband's life. I'm not destroying anything. He destroyed his own life by lying, cheating, and misusing company resources. I'm just making sure the truth became visible instead of staying hidden. Fair point. He's going to fight this, you know? The divorce, the asset division, all of it. Let him fight. I have documentation of everything. His affair, his lies, his misuse of marital assets. What's his defense? That he didn't mean to get caught? Probably something like that, yes. We reviewed the divorce petition one more time. It was straightforward. Irreconcilable differences, equitable division of assets, no alimony requested by either party. Clean, simple, designed to be resolved quickly if Blake didn't contest. If he contests, how long? I asked. Could be 6 months to a year. Depends on how aggressively he fights and what he claims. I can wait a year. I have evidence, patience, and no desire to stay married to him one day longer than legally required. Then we'll proceed. Be prepared for him to try to contact you directly, despite instructions to go through me. I'm prepared. I left Natasha's office and went to the storage unit I'd rented, where my suitcases from the weekend were waiting. I started moving boxes to my new apartment, making multiple trips, building my new life one carload at a time. Around 3 p.m., my phone exploded with calls and texts from Blake. I was just fired. Because of you. Howard said I was misusing company resources and potentially sharing proprietary information with competitors. I'm being investigated for corporate espionage. Do you understand what you've done? My career is over. Over. Because you couldn't just talk to me like an adult. You've destroyed everything. I hope you're satisfied. I read the texts with detached interest. The progression from shock to anger to blame was predictable. He couldn't accept responsibility, so he was making me the villain. I texted back one line. You destroyed your career when you started an affair with a competitor's employee and misused company funds. I just made sure the truth became known. All further communication through my lawyer. Blake called immediately. I didn't answer. More texts. You're going to regret this. I promise you that. I'll fight this divorce with everything I have. You won't get a penny from me. Everyone's going to know what a vindictive person you are. I showed the texts to Taylor, who'd come to help me unpack. He's threatening you. No, he's panicking. There's a difference. Still, save these texts. They might be useful if he escalates. I'm saving everything. Trust me. That evening, Blake called from his mother's number, presumably because I'd blocked his. I answered because Constance didn't deserve to be ignored for her son's mistakes. Cassandra, honey, what's going on? Constance's voice was confused and worried. Blake just showed up here saying he's been fired and you filed for divorce. Is this true? It's true. I'm sorry you're finding out this way, but Blake's been having an affair for 9 months. I have extensive proof. The divorce is necessary. An affair? Blake? That can't be right. There must be some misunderstanding. Face to face. No lawyers, just us. No, Cassandra, please. I'm losing everything. My job, my wife, my home. Don't I at least deserve a chance to explain? You had 9 months to explain. You chose to lie instead. We're done talking, Blake. I hung up and blocked his number permanently. If you wanted to contact me, it would have to be through Natasha. Tuesday morning, I met Constance at a quiet cafe far from our neighborhood. She looked older than I'd seen her last, tired and confused. Show me, she said, after we'd ordered coffee. Show me the proof. I showed her photos from Singapore, text messages between Blake and Sienna, credit card statements showing personal expenses charged as business costs. She looked through everything in silence, her face growing increasingly pale. How long have you known? She finally asked. 6 weeks. I hired a private investigator after I noticed Blake deleting messages. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Because I needed to be sure. And I needed to gather evidence before Blake could hide it or destroy it. I wasn't going to accuse him of something I couldn't prove definitively. What happens now? We get divorced. The house sells. We divide assets. Blake deals with the consequences of his choices. He's my son. I love him. But Cassandra, I'm so sorry. What he did, there's no excuse for it. Thank you for saying that. What do you need from me? Nothing. Just don't let him make me the villain in this story. I didn't start this. I just refuse to ignore it. I won't. And for what it's worth, I always liked you. You were good for Blake. He was lucky to have you. Was being the key word. Constance hugged me before we parted, and I felt genuinely sad. I'd liked her too, but Blake's family couldn't be my family anymore. That was one of many losses that came with divorce. The rest of the week passed in a blur of apartment setup and work. My consulting business was actually thriving. I'd been taking on more projects over the past 6 weeks, partly as distraction and partly as financial preparation for independence. Clients were happy, money was flowing, my professional life was stable, even as my personal life dissolved. Wednesday, my furniture arrived. I spent the day arranging it, creating a space that felt like mine. No compromises, no decorating decisions based on what Blake might prefer. Just my taste, my choices. Thursday, Blake attempted one more direct contact by showing up at my office building. Security called me before letting him up. Tell him I'm not available, I said, and document that he came here despite being told to communicate through my lawyer. Will do. You okay? I'm fine. Just an ex-husband who doesn't understand boundaries. Blake left after security made it clear I wouldn't see him. But he left a letter at the front desk, which security gave me. I read it in my office. Cassandra, I know you don't want to talk to me, but I need you to understand something. I never stopped loving you. The thing with Sienna was a mistake, a temporary insanity brought on by stress and opportunity. It meant nothing. You're destroying both our lives over something that didn't even threaten our marriage. We could have worked through this privately, gone to counseling, fixed what was broken. Instead, you've turned it into public warfare. I lost my job because you talked to Howard. I'm being investigated for corporate espionage because you provided evidence taken from my personal laptop without my consent. I'm facing financial ruin because you're forcing the sale of our house. Is this really what you want? To destroy me completely? Because that's what you're doing. And for what? To punish me for a mistake I already regret? I'm asking you one more time. Please, let's talk. Let's try to salvage something from this wreckage. We were happy once. We could be happy again if you just give us a chance. I love you. That has to mean something. Blake, I read the letter twice, then forwarded a photo of it to Natasha with a note. More attempted contact. Please send a cease and desist letter making clear that all communication must go through you. Then I threw the letter in the trash where it belonged. Blake's framing was impressive in its total inversion of reality. He was the victim. I was the destroyer. His affair didn't threaten our marriage somehow, and the evidence I'd gathered from his laptop, which was technically joint property, was presented as some kind of illegal surveillance. None of it would hold up legally, but it revealed how Blake was planning to frame our divorce as my overreaction to his minor mistake, as my vindictiveness destroying an otherwise salvageable marriage. I wouldn't let that narrative stand. Friday afternoon, I received notice that the house was listed for sale. The realtor predicted it would sell quickly, desirable neighborhood, excellent condition, priced competitively. Could close in 45 to 60 days if we get a good offer, she said. Are you prepared for that timeline? Completely. And your husband is on board with the sale? He doesn't have a choice. The divorce decree requires it. All right then, let's sell this house. By Sunday, we'd had 3 showings and 2 offers, both over asking price. The realtor recommended accepting the higher one, which would net us each a substantial profit after paying off the mortgage. I approved the offer. Blake, through his lawyer, contested it, arguing the house should be kept and refinanced under his name. His lawyer withdrew that request after Natasha pointed out Blake no longer had employment income to qualify for a mortgage. The house would close in 45 days. 2 weeks after filing for divorce, I'd successfully separated from Blake physically, established my own living space, secured evidence of his affair and financial misconduct, triggered his termination from his job, forced the sale of our house, cut off all direct communication. Blake, meanwhile, had lost his job, lost his income, lost his marriage, lost his credibility. Sienna had apparently ended their relationship once the scandal became public. Lost control of the narrative, and the divorce hadn't even really started yet. Natasha called me with an update. Blake's lawyer is requesting mediation. They're willing to agree to all terms if we drop the requirement that Blake admit fault in the dissolution paperwork. No, Cassandra, admitting fault is largely symbolic. It doesn't change the asset division or the finality of the divorce. I don't care. I wanted in writing that this divorce is happening because Blake committed adultery. I want the public record to reflect the truth. That will make him fight harder. This could drag out months longer. Let it drag. I have time, patience, and evidence. Blake has shame, legal bills, and a story that doesn't hold up to scrutiny. Let him fight. I'll win. You're certain? Completely. 3 weeks after filing, Blake attempted contact one more time, not with me directly. but through a mutual friend, Austin, who called sounding uncomfortable. Cass, I'm in an awkward position here. Blake asked me to reach out to you. Tell him to talk to my lawyer. He says you won't listen, that you've shut him out completely without hearing his side. Austin, I was in Singapore. I saw him with another woman. I have 9 months of evidence documenting systematic lies. What side of that story am I supposed to hear? He says it's not what you think. It's exactly what I think. Blake was having an affair. He used our money and his company's resources to maintain that affair. He lied to me repeatedly. Those are facts, not interpretations. He's really struggling, Cass. Lost his job, living with his mom, dealing with an espionage investigation. Maybe you could ease up a little. Austin, whose idea was it for you to call me? Blake's, but I agreed because I thought maybe if I explained, you thought wrong. Blake made choices that destroyed our marriage and his career. I'm not responsible for the consequences of his decisions. Tell him I said to stop using mutual friends as messengers. Communication goes through lawyers. Period. I hung up and immediately texted Austin. Don't contact me again about Blake. You're choosing his side, and that's fine, but that means we're not friends anymore. Respect that boundary. Taylor was impressed when I told her. You're being ruthless. I'm being clear. Blake keeps trying to find ways around my boundaries. Every time someone calls on his behalf, it's an attempt to manipulate me into feeling guilty or reconsidering. I'm not doing that. Do you ever feel guilty? For what? Exposing the truth? Refusing to accept betrayal? No. I feel sad sometimes about what we lost, but I don't feel guilty about protecting myself. That's remarkably healthy. It's survival. Guilt would just make me vulnerable to more manipulation. 1 month after filing for divorce, I was thriving. My apartment felt like home. My consulting business was growing. I'd started going to yoga classes and therapy, both of which were helping me process the end of my marriage without getting stuck in bitterness. Blake, according to the updates I received through Natasha, was not thriving. He'd been formally charged with misusing company resources, though criminal charges for espionage had been dropped due to insufficient evidence. He was interviewing for new jobs, but struggling because of his termination circumstances. His settlement offer through lawyers was increasingly desperate. I didn't feel sorry for him. Maybe that made me cold. But I'd watched Blake lie to my face for 9 months while planning a future with someone else. He'd spent our money, used our home, leveraged our marriage, all while building something separate with Sienna. He'd made choices. Now he lived with them. The house closed 47 days after listing. I attended the closing alone. Blake sent his lawyer as representative. We each received checks for our half of the profit. I deposited mine immediately and started looking at condos to buy. Something smaller than the house, but mine alone. A fresh start, financially and emotionally. Blake, I learned later, had to use most of his share to pay legal bills and cover expenses while unemployed. Choices, consequences. 6 weeks after filing for divorce. Blake's lawyer finally accepted my terms. Fault-based dissolution citing adultery, equal division of remaining assets. No spousal support either direction. Clean break. He's ready to be done fighting, Natasha told me. He knows he won't win. So it's over? Paperwork still needs to be processed. But yes, essentially, it's over. You'll be officially divorced in about 60 days once the court processes everything. 60 days. 2 months. Then it would be final. I'd spent 8 years married to Blake. It would take 8 months total to be unmarried. Proof that ending something was faster than building it. That destruction was always easier than creation. But I wasn't just destroying. I was rebuilding. The apartment, the business, the life that was mine alone. All of it was construction, not demolition. That evening, I went to dinner with Taylor to celebrate. To freedom, she toasted. To truth, I countered. Freedom's just what happens when you stop accepting lies. Deep, also accurate. We ordered expensive wine and laughed about things that had nothing to do with Blake, or divorce, or betrayal. We talked about her dating life, my business plans, the trip to Italy we were planning for next year. I felt lighter than I had in months. The revenge, if that's what it was, had brought relief, not bitterness. Clarity, not confusion. Blake had tried to live two lives. I'd made him choose one and face the consequences of trying to have both. That wasn't cruelty. It was justice. And justice, I'd learned, felt a lot like peace. The next 2 months passed with surprising normalcy. I worked. I decorated my apartment. I started dating, casually, nothing serious. Just relearning what it felt like to have conversations with men who weren't Blake. The divorce paperwork processed through the court system with bureaucratic slowness. Every few weeks, Natasha would update me. Signed here, filed there, one step closer to official dissolution. Blake and I existed in parallel universes that occasionally intersected through lawyers, but never directly. I'd hear updates about him through mutual friends who still talked to both of us, carefully neutral in their reporting. He'd found a new job, though at a significant pay cut and with a lower title than before. He was living with his mother still, working on rebuilding his savings. Sienna had moved to Seattle and blocked him on all platforms. He was in therapy, supposedly dealing with his impulse control issues, a fascinating reframing of 9 months of calculated deception. I didn't wish him ill. I just wished him gone from my life completely. 8 weeks after accepting the divorce terms, I received a call from Natasha. It's final. As of today, you're officially divorced. I'd thought I'd feel something dramatic in that moment. Relief, sadness, liberation, grief. Instead, I just felt quiet. It was done. That chapter was closed. Time to move forward. Thank you for everything, I told Natasha. You made it easy. You had evidence, clear goals, and you didn't let emotion override strategy. That's rare in divorce cases. I had 6 weeks to process emotions before filing. By the time we started legal proceedings, I'd already done my grieving. Smart. Most people do it the other way around. File in anger, then grieve while fighting, which makes everything messier. After hanging up with Natasha, I sat in my apartment, looking out at the city, and thought about the past 4 months. The discovery, the investigation, the confrontation, the divorce. All of it had happened because I'd noticed Blake deleting texts one evening and decided to find out why, instead of ignoring my suspicions. What if I hadn't noticed? How much longer would the affair have continued? Would Blake have eventually left me for Sienna, or would he have maintained both relationships indefinitely? I'd never know. And it didn't matter. What mattered was that I'd chosen truth over comfortable ignorance. I'd chosen self-respect over preserving a marriage that was already broken. I'd chosen action over passive acceptance. Those choices had cost me 8 years of investment, a house I'd grown attached to, a future I'd thought I was building, but they'd gained me something more valuable. Proof that I could handle betrayal without falling apart, that I could strategize under pressure, that I was stronger than I'd known. My phone buzzed. Taylor, officially divorced today. Yes. How do you feel? Like I can breathe fully, for the first time in 4 months. Come over tonight. We're celebrating properly. Champagne and terrible romantic comedies. Perfect. I spent the afternoon working on a client presentation, then drove to Taylor's apartment. She'd prepared a feast, takeout from my favorite Thai restaurant, champagne in an ice bucket, and a lineup of movies where the protagonist always ended up happier without their ex. To Cassandra, Taylor toasted, who faced betrayal with strategy instead of hysteria, and came out stronger. I don't know about stronger, just more informed about what I will and won't tolerate. That's strength. Trust me. We watched movies and talked about my life post-Blake. I'd been on 3 dates with different men in the past month, none of them particularly promising, but all of them helpful in remembering I was capable of connecting with people who weren't my ex-husband. "Are you ready for something serious?" Taylor asked. "No, but I'm ready to be open to possibilities. That's enough for now." "What about Blake? Any contact since the divorce finalized?" "None, and there won't be. We have no shared assets left, no reason to communicate. He's living his life, I'm living mine. That's how it should be." But I was wrong about that. 2 weeks after the divorce finalized, I received a letter delivered to my apartment. Not from Blake's lawyer, just from Blake, handwritten on expensive stationery. "Cassandra, I know you don't want to hear from me. I know you've moved on and built a new life without me. But I needed to write this before I could fully move forward myself. You were right about everything. I lied to you, betrayed you, treated our marriage like it was disposable, while pursuing something that ultimately meant nothing. I destroyed what we had, for reasons I still don't fully understand." Therapy has helped me see that I was running from intimacy, from the vulnerability of really being known by someone. You knew me better than anyone, and that scared me. Sienna didn't know me at all, which made her safe. But safe isn't real. Safe isn't love. I'm not writing to ask for forgiveness or another chance. I know that's not possible. I'm writing to say I understand now what I lost, what I threw away, and I'm sorry. Genuinely, deeply sorry. You deserved better than what I gave you. You deserved honesty, faithfulness, respect. I failed to provide any of those things. That's on me, not you. No matter how I tried to justify it or blame our marriage problems, the truth is simple. I chose to betray you. That was my decision, my failure, my fault. I hope you're happy in your new life. I hope you find someone who treats you the way I should have. I hope someday you can remember the good parts of our time together without the bad parts eclipsing them completely. Thank you for teaching me, through your response to my betrayal, what real strength looks like. You didn't fall apart or become bitter. You just quietly, methodically, took control of your situation and made decisions based on your values and needs. That's more grace than I deserved, and more courage than I could have shown. I'm sorry for everything. I wish I could go back and make different choices, but I can't. So all I can do is learn from what happened and become someone better going forward. Be well, Cassandra. I read the letter 3 times, looking for manipulation, for hidden agendas, for any sign that this was another attempt to control the narrative or make me feel guilty. But it seemed sincere, genuinely reflective, accepting responsibility, not making excuses. Too late, of course. 4 months too late. But sincere. I called Taylor. Blake sent me a letter, an actual apology, taking full responsibility, no excuses, no manipulation. How do you feel about that? I don't know. Part of me is glad he finally understands what he did, but mostly I just feel nothing. His growth doesn't undo the damage. His understanding doesn't change what happened. Are you going to respond? No. What would I say? Thanks for finally getting it 4 months after destroying our marriage? There's nothing to say. He's on his own journey now. I'm on mine. Those paths don't need to intersect anymore. That's very mature of you. It's not maturity. It's just clarity. Blake's apology is about him feeling better, clearing his conscience, moving forward. I don't need to be part of that process. I already moved forward. I kept the letter in a drawer but didn't respond. Blake had said his piece. That was enough. 3 months after the divorce finalized, I bought a condo, a beautiful 2-bedroom overlooking the river, with a home office and a balcony where I could drink coffee in the mornings. It was mine, purchased entirely with my own money, decorated exactly to my taste. The day I moved in, I felt like I'd finally arrived somewhere I was meant to be, not just physically, but emotionally and psychologically. The woman who'd stood in an airport lounge 6 months ago, watching her husband board a plane with his mistress, felt distant now, almost like a character in someone else's story. That woman had been hurt, but determined, angry, but controlled, grieving but strategic. This version of me had processed the hurt, acted on the determination, moved past the anger, and come through the other side stronger and more certain of who I was and what I deserved. I didn't regret the 8 years with Blake. They'd taught me things I needed to learn, even if the lessons were painful. I'd learned that love without honesty was performance, that comfort without respect was stagnation, that staying in something broken was cowardice dressed as commitment. I'd also learned that I was capable of more than I'd known. More strength, more strategy, more ruthless clarity when needed. The title of my experience: My husband lied about his business trip. I bought his plane ticket home for one. Had seemed clever when I'd first thought of it, sitting in that airport lounge. But now I understood it more deeply. I hadn't actually bought Blake a ticket home. He'd had his own tickets, his own plans, his own carefully constructed lies about where he was and who he was with. What I'd bought was my own ticket away from a marriage built on deception, my own flight toward something authentic, my own journey home to myself. Blake had to find his own way home from the wreckage of his lies and the consequences of his choices. I was already there, settled and secure in a life I built consciously, deliberately, without compromise or deception. 4 months after the divorce finalized, I ran into Blake at a coffee shop downtown. It was the first time I'd seen him in person since that confrontation in our driveway when I'd been collecting my things. He looked better than I'd expected, healthier, more together. The desperate panic I'd seen in Singapore and during the divorce proceedings was gone, replaced by something quieter and more resigned. "Cassandra," he said, surprised. Hi, Blake. Can I talk to you for a minute? I promise I won't take long." I hesitated, then nodded. We moved to a corner table, coffee cups between us like armor. "I got your letter," I said. "The apology. I didn't expect you to respond. I just needed to say it." "I know. How are you?" he asked. "Good. Really good, actually. Thriving." "I'm glad. You deserve that." He paused. "I heard you bought a condo?" "I did. Moved in last month." "That's great. Really." We sat in awkward silence for a moment. "Blake, why did you do it?" I asked suddenly. Not the affair specifically, but the lies, the systematic deception. "If you are that unhappy, why not just tell me? Why not just end the marriage honestly?" "Because I didn't want to be the bad guy. I wanted to have everything. You, Sienna, my career, my reputation. I thought I could manage it all. Keep all the pieces separate. Never have to make a real choice. That's not how life works. I know that now. But at the time, I genuinely believed I could pull it off, that I was smart enough, careful enough." He smiled bitterly. "Turns out I wasn't nearly as clever as I thought. No one is. Lies always reveal themselves eventually. You revealed them, on purpose, methodically. Yes. Do you regret it? How you handled things? The public exposure? The scorched earth approach?" I thought about that. No, I regret that it was necessary. But given that you weren't going to stop lying voluntarily, I did what I needed to do to protect myself and ensure you faced consequences. You destroyed my career. You destroyed your career when you started an affair with a competitor's employee and misused company resources. I just made sure the truth became known instead of staying hidden. I know. You're right. I'm not blaming you. He trailed off. "I just wish things had been different." "So do I. But wishing doesn't change what happened. Are you dating anyone?" "That's not your business anymore." "Right. Sorry. What about you? Have you talked to Sienna?" "No. She wanted nothing to do with me once everything became public. Blocked me everywhere. Can't say I blame her." "Neither can I." Blake finished his coffee. "I should go." I just wanted to say, if I could do it all over, I'd make different choices. Better choices. You deserved so much better than what I gave you. I know I did. That's why I left. Fair enough. He stood, Take care, Cassandra. You too, Blake. I watched him walk away, out of the coffee shop and out of my life again. Hopefully, for good this time. Taylor called that evening. So, how was running into Blake? Weird. He's still processing everything, still working through his guilt. Did you feel anything? Sadness, maybe. Not for losing him, but for the time we wasted. 8 years building something that was never as real as I thought it was. That's not wasted time. You learned things, I suppose. But I wish I'd learned them faster. We all wish that about something. 5 months after the divorce finalized, I went on a first date that actually felt promising. His name was Owen. He owned a bookstore, and he made me laugh without trying too hard. So what ended your marriage? He asked over dinner. If that's not too personal a question. He was having an affair. I found out, gathered evidence, filed for divorce. That sounds very organized. It was. I'm not someone who does dramatic confrontations. I'm someone who documents everything and makes strategic decisions. That's either incredibly mature or slightly terrifying. Maybe both. Owen smiled. I like someone who knows what they want and isn't afraid to act on it. We talked for 3 hours, way past when we'd intended to end the date. When we finally left the restaurant, Owen asked if he could see me again. Yes, I said. I'd like that. And I meant it. I was ready for this, ready to try again with someone new. Someone who hopefully understood that honesty was non-negotiable and that trust, once broken, couldn't be rebuilt. 6 months after the divorce finalized, I was having coffee with Constance, Blake's mother, who I'd kept in occasional touch with, despite everything. How is he? I asked. Really? Better. Humbler. He's working hard at his new job, seeing his therapist regularly, trying to rebuild his life. Does he date? Not that he's told me. I think he's still processing what happened, why he made the choices he did. Has he talked to you about it? Some. He takes full responsibility now. Doesn't blame you at all, though he did initially. His therapist helped him see how he'd been lying to himself as much as to you. I'm glad he's getting help. Cassandra, can I ask you something? Do you hate him? I thought about that. No, I did for a while, but hate takes too much energy. I'm just indifferent now. He's someone I used to know, who hurt me badly, who I've moved past. That's all. That's remarkably healthy. It's survival. Holding on to hate would just mean Blake was still controlling part of my emotional life. I won't give him that power. Constance squeezed my hand. You're an impressive woman. Blake was lucky to have you, and a fool to lose you. He was. But now, someone else will be lucky to have me. Someone who deserves it. 8 months after the divorce finalized, exactly 1 year after I discovered Blake's affair, I was at my condo hosting a dinner party. Taylor, Owen, and several other friends were there, laughing and drinking wine and filling my space with warmth and joy. Owen caught my eye from across the room and smiled, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years, genuine happiness untainted by anxiety or doubt. This was real. This life, these people, this version of myself, all of it was real and earned and mine. The revenge I'd planned so carefully, the strategic dismantling of Blake's lies and reputation had brought me here. To this moment, this place, this person I'd become, by refusing to accept betrayal as something to endure silently. What are you thinking about? Taylor asked, joining me on the balcony where I'd stepped out for air. How different everything is from a year ago. Better different? Definitely harder in some ways, but better. Do you ever regret how you handled things with Blake? No. I did what I needed to do to protect myself and ensure he faced consequences. That's not something to regret. Even though it meant destroying his career, he destroyed his own career. I just made sure the truth was known. There's a difference. You're very clear about that. I have to be. Otherwise, I'd second-guess every decision, wonder if I was too harsh, let guilt eat away at me. But I wasn't too harsh. I was exactly harsh enough. Taylor laughed. I love that you can say that without flinching. I earned that certainty. Cost me 8 years in a marriage, but I earned it. What did you earn? The knowledge that I'm capable of protecting myself even when it's difficult. That I can make hard choices without falling apart. That I'm stronger than I knew. That's worth more than any marriage. It really is. We went back inside to our friends, to the warmth and laughter and life I'd built from the ruins of what Blake had destroyed. I thought about the title again. My husband lied about his business trip. I bought his plane ticket home for one. I hadn't bought his ticket. That had been his all along. But I bought my own freedom. A year after the divorce finalized, I was promoted to senior partner at my consulting firm. The raise was substantial, the recognition gratifying, but what mattered most was that I'd earned it entirely on my own merits. No one knew me as Blake's ex-wife in professional circles. I was just Cassandra, the strategist who consistently delivered results. Owen and I were still together, moving slowly, building something genuine, with none of the rush or intensity that had characterized my relationship with Blake. We'd said I love you for the first time last month, on a weekend trip to the mountains where we'd hiked and talked and simply existed together without pretense or performance. "Do you think you'll get married again?" he asked one evening, as we cooked dinner in my condo. "Eventually, maybe, but I'm not in a hurry." I spent 8 years in a marriage that looked perfect, but was hollow. I'd rather take my time building something real than rush into something that just looks right. That's fair. What would make it real for you? What would be different from what you had with Blake? Honesty. Complete, uncomfortable, vulnerable honesty. The kind where we tell each other hard truths and don't hide parts of ourselves because we're afraid of judgment. That sounds exhausting. It is, but less exhausting than maintaining a facade that eventually crumbles anyway. Owen set down the knife he'd been using to chop vegetables and turned to face me. "Okay then. Uncomfortable honesty time. Sometimes I'm intimidated by how together you seem. How you always know what you want and aren't afraid to go after it. It makes me worry I'm not decisive enough for you." I appreciated the vulnerability. I don't need you to be as decisive as me. I just need you to be honest about what you want and willing to work toward it together. That's different from decisive. That's partnership. I can do that. Good, then we're on the right track. We finished cooking and ate on my balcony, watching the city lights reflect on the river. This was contentment. Not the manufactured kind I'd performed with Blake, but the real kind that came from being with someone who actually saw me and chose me anyway. 18 months after the divorce, I ran into Sienna at a conference. She was representing her company in Seattle, and I was there presenting on strategic crisis management. Ironically fitting, given my personal experience. "Cassandra," she said, when we found ourselves at the same networking reception. "I didn't know you'd be here. Surprise? Can we talk?" Just for a minute. I followed her to a quiet corner. She looked different. Thinner, tired, less confident than the woman I'd seen boarding that plane with Blake. "I wanted to apologize," she said, "for the affair, for my part in hurting you. I knew Blake was married. I justified it by telling myself your marriage was already over, that I wasn't really the problem. But I was wrong. I was part of the problem. Yes, you were. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry, for whatever that's worth." I studied her for a moment. "Can I ask you something? When did you realize Blake was lying to you too?" "What do you mean?" "He told you I didn't understand him, that we'd grown apart, that our marriage was essentially over. But none of that was true. We were fine until he started lying." "So when did you realize he was feeding you a version of reality that served his purposes?" Sienna looked away. "When everything blew up. When I realized he'd been telling me what I wanted to hear without any of it being true. He wasn't leaving you for me. He was just having both of us. And I'd been naive enough to believe I was special. You weren't special. You were convenient, just like I was when we first met. Blake has a type. Women who make him feel important without challenging him too much. That's harsh. It's accurate. And honestly, Sienna, I don't hate you. I probably should, but I don't. You were just another person Blake lied to. The difference is, you didn't stand to lose 8 years of investment when the lies came out. For what it's worth, I learned from it. I'm in therapy. I'm working on understanding why I was attracted to a married man, why I convinced myself it was okay. It's not something I'll do again. Good. Learn from it. Become someone better. That's all any of us can do after we mess up. We parted amicably, and I felt lighter afterward. Confronting Sienna, seeing her remorse, understanding that she'd been played too, it provided closure I hadn't known I needed. 2 years after the divorce, Blake got remarried. I heard about it through Constance, who called to give me advance warning before I saw it on social media. Her name is Patricia. She's a teacher, very grounded. They've been dating for 8 months, and he proposed last week. That's fast, I know, but he seems different this time. More present, more honest. His therapy has really helped. I'm glad for him, genuinely. Everyone deserves a chance to get it right. You're not upset? Why would I be? Blake and I have been done for 2 years. Him moving on doesn't affect my life at all. You're remarkably mature about all this. I'm just over it. Completely. He's someone I used to know who I've moved past. When I hung up with Constance, Owen asked if I was okay. I'm fine. Better than fine. Blake getting remarried doesn't change anything about my life. Most people would feel something about their ex remarrying. Most people didn't spend 6 weeks strategically documenting their spouse's betrayal and 4 months dismantling his lies in divorce court. I processed my feelings about Blake thoroughly. There's nothing left to process. That's almost scary how complete your closure is. It's not scary. It's healthy. I don't carry Blake with me anymore. He's the past. This, you, my career, my life, is the present and future. Owen kissed me. I love how certain you are about things. I learned to be certain. Cost me a marriage, but it was worth it. 3 years after the divorce, Owen proposed. We were at the same mountain cabin where we'd first said I love you, and his proposal was simple and genuine. I want to build a life with you, not because it's expected or because we've been together long enough, but because I genuinely can't imagine my future without you in it. Yes, I said without hesitation. We planned a small wedding, just close friends and family, nothing elaborate or performative. I'd had the big wedding with Blake, with all the traditional elements and hundreds of guests. This time, I wanted intimacy and meaning over spectacle. The night before the wedding, Taylor asked me if I was nervous. Not even a little bit. Why not? Because I know exactly what I'm doing and why. I'm not marrying Owen because I'm supposed to, or because I'm afraid of being alone. I'm marrying him because we've built something real together, something based on honesty and respect and genuine partnership. That's beautiful. It's practical. Marriage should be based on more than feelings. It should be based on aligned values and demonstrated behavior over time. You've really thought about this. I had to. After Blake, I couldn't just trust my feelings or believe someone's words. I had to learn to evaluate actions, patterns, consistency over time. Owen has shown me consistently for 3 years who he is and what he values. That's what I'm choosing to build a life with. The wedding was perfect, not because everything went flawlessly, but because it was authentic. Owen cried during his vows. I laughed during mine. Our friends cheered when we kissed, and the whole thing felt joyful in a way my first wedding never had. At the reception, Constance approached me. I'm so happy for you, Cassandra. You deserve this. Thank you. That means a lot. Can I tell you something? Blake asked if he could send a gift. I told him no, that your wedding wasn't about him or your past. But he wanted you to know he's genuinely happy for you. That's kind of him. Tell him I appreciate it. You're not angry that I'm still in contact with him. Why would I be? He's your son. I don't expect you to choose between us. We've both moved on. Him being in your life doesn't affect mine. You're an impressive woman. I hope Owen knows how lucky he is. He does. I made sure he understood that before agreeing to marry him. Constance laughed. Of course you did. 4 years after the divorce, Owen and I bought a house together. Not too big, not too small, just right for the two of us and the life we were building. We chose it together, compromising where necessary, but never deferring entirely to the other's preferences. This is what partnership looks like, I told Owen as we unpacked boxes. Equal input, mutual respect, decisions made together. Is this how it was with Blake? No. With Blake, I deferred constantly. I told myself I was being flexible and compromising, but really, I was just letting him make decisions because it seemed easier than advocating for what I wanted. What changed? I did. I learned that deferring isn't compromise, it's erasure. And I'm never letting myself be erased again. Good. I like you assertive and clear about what you want. I like me that way too. It just took losing everything to learn how to be her. 5 years after the divorce, exactly 6 years after discovering Blake's affair, I published a book about strategic decision-making in crisis situations. It was ostensibly about business, but anyone who knew my story would recognize the underlying themes: how to gather information, how to make decisions under pressure, how to act strategically when emotions want to override logic. The book did well, got positive reviews, led to speaking engagements. People wanted to know how to maintain composure during difficult times, how to make clear-headed decisions when everything felt chaotic. I became known as the strategist who never panicked, the consultant who could navigate any crisis with calm precision. It was funny, in a way. My greatest personal crisis, Blake's betrayal, had become my greatest professional asset. The skills I developed while documenting his affair and planning my divorce had applications far beyond marriage. They were universal principles of strategic thinking that applied to business, relationships, any situation requiring clear thinking under pressure. During a speaking engagement at a university, a student asked, "How do you stay so calm when everything's falling apart?" "I don't," I answered honestly. "Inside, I'm often panicking, but I've learned to separate feeling from action. You can feel panicked while still acting calmly. You can feel heartbroken while still making strategic decisions. Emotions are valid, but they don't have to control your choices." How did you learn that? The hard way. By facing a situation where giving in to emotion would have made things worse. I had to choose between falling apart and taking control. I chose control. Do you regret that choice? Never. Control gave me power. Emotion would have left me vulnerable. After the talk, a woman approached me, probably mid-30s, looking stressed and exhausted. "I think my husband is cheating," she said quietly. "I found texts on his phone. I confronted him and he denied it, said I was paranoid. But I know something's wrong. What should I do?" Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, investigate. Don't confront again until you have evidence. Document everything: texts, expenses, timeline inconsistencies, and talk to a lawyer before your husband knows you're serious. Control the information and the timeline. That sounds so calculated. It is, but calculated doesn't mean wrong. It means strategic, and strategy is how you protect yourself when someone you love is hurting you. Thank you. I needed to hear that. I watched her walk away and felt satisfied. The lessons I'd learned weren't just about my own experience. They were tools other people could use to protect themselves, to refuse victimhood, to take control of situations that felt overwhelming. 6 years after the divorce, Owen and I had our first child, a daughter we named Claire. Holding her in the hospital, I felt overwhelmed by love and responsibility in equal measure. "Are you scared?" Owen asked, terrified and grateful, and determined to do better than my parents did, better than I did in my first marriage. "You'll be an amazing mother. I'll be a strategic mother. I'll teach her to think clearly, advocate for herself, refuse to accept less than she deserves. She's 1 day old. Maybe give her a few years before the life lessons?" I laughed. Fair point. But someday I'm going to tell her about Blake, about the betrayal and the divorce and how I handled it. I'm going to teach her that falling apart isn't the only option when someone hurts you. She's lucky to have you. We'll see. Ask me again in 18 years when she's a teenager. 7 years after the divorce, I ran into Blake one final time at a coffee shop near my house, both of us picking up orders, both surprised to see each other. Cassandra. Wow, it's been years. It has. How are you, Blake? Good, really good. Patricia and I just had a baby, a son. Congratulations. That's wonderful. Thanks. What about you? I heard you got married, wrote a book? Yes, to both. Owen and I have a daughter. She's almost a year old. That's great. I am happy for you. We stood there awkwardly for a moment, two people who'd once promised forever, now making small talk, like distant acquaintances. Blake, can I say something? Of course. I forgive you. For the affair, the lies, all of it. Not because you asked for it or because I've forgotten what happened, but because carrying anger for 7 years serves no purpose. You made terrible choices. I responded to them. We both moved on. That's all there is to it. Blake looked genuinely moved. Thank you. That means more than you know. And Cassandra, I'm sorry. I know I said it before, but I mean it. I'm genuinely sorry for everything I did. I know you are. Be good to Patricia. Don't make the same mistakes. I won't. I promise. Good. Take care, Blake. You too. I walked away feeling lighter than I had in years. Forgiveness wasn't about Blake. It was about me releasing the last threads of connection to that painful chapter of my life. He was truly in my past now, not someone I carried with me. 8 years after discovering Blake's affair, exactly 8 years to the day, I was sitting on my back porch watching Owen play with Claire in our yard. The sun was setting, painting everything in golden light, and I felt a profound sense of contentment. 8 years ago, I'd been sitting in an airport lounge watching my husband board a plane with his mistress, planning revenge and divorce and freedom. I'd been hurt and angry and determined. Now I was healed and content and grateful. The revenge had brought justice. The divorce had brought freedom. The freedom had brought space to rebuild myself into someone stronger and more certain. I thought about the title one more time. My husband lied about his business trip. I bought his plane ticket home for one. The metaphor had evolved over time. It wasn't just about exposing Blake's lies or forcing him to fly home alone from Singapore. It was about the bigger journey, the one where I'd bought my own ticket away from betrayal and toward authenticity. Blake had tried to live 2 lives. I'd made him choose one and face the consequences. That had been necessary and just. But the real victory wasn't Blake's downfall. It was what I built afterward. The career, that refusing to be a victim didn't mean you couldn't also be vulnerable. Claire laughed at something Owen did, and I smiled at the sound. This was real. This life, these people, this version of myself who could be both strong and soft, strategic and vulnerable, calculating when necessary, but open when safe. Blake's betrayal had broken me temporarily, but they were the same person, just evolved, healed, transformed by the journey from betrayal to justice to genuine peace. Owen caught my eye and smiled, and I felt the warmth of being seen and chosen by someone who actually valued me. That was the best revenge of all, living so fully and authentically that the person who'd tried to diminish you became completely irrelevant to your happiness. Blake existed somewhere, living his life, hopefully having learned his lessons. I wished him well in an abstract way, but I didn't think about him anymore. Not really. He was just a chapter in my history, an important one, a painful one, but not the defining one. The defining chapter was this, the one where I'd learned to choose myself, protect myself, and build a life that didn't require performance or pretense or hiding parts of who I was. 8 years after the worst thing that ever happened to me, I was living the best life I could imagine. And that wasn't spite or revenge or even justice. It was simply truth. Refusing to accept betrayal had led me to something infinitely better than what I'd lost. The plane ticket home, the metaphorical one, had been for me all along. I'd bought my own freedom, charted my own course, and arrived exactly where I was supposed to be. And Blake had to find his own way home from his own mistakes. That was his journey, not mine. Mine was here, now, complete and exactly right.